Mums, here's something you might not know. So many toddler milks use skim milk and have so many processed oils, but Haven toddler milks, they're different. They're crafted with a whole milk base, no palm oil, no added sugars, and science-backed nutrition to support your little one's growth. Plus, you can choose from A2 cow, goat, or plant-based oat. So there's a Haven for every little tummy. Head to havenbaby.com.au to find out more and use Danni50 for a massive 50% off your first single tin purchase.
Hey guys, before we dive in, I just wanted to let you know that I actually have a label reading masterclass available. So if you finish this episode and you're like, well, shoot, where do I begin? Start there. I run you through what to look for when you're buying packaged food so that you can make informed, healthy choices for you and your family. The link is in the show notes.
Hello and welcome back to Life with Danni Duncan. Imagine finding out foods marketed as healthy, whole grain, good for your kids, are now part of a lawsuit claiming they contribute to disease. That's right. The San Francisco government is suing Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Heinz, Nestle, Mars, Kellogg's, and so many more massive brands because they're finally making a stand against ultra-processed foods. So what can we do? Well, today I've brought my friend and pediatric dietitian and founder of the Real Food Movement, Mandy Sacher, to unpack all this. We're going to break down exactly what happened last week and also give you some simple ways that you can start to reclaim both you and your family's health. So welcome back, Mandy.
Thank you, Danni. Thank you for having me here.
You're welcome. As soon as this came out, I obviously shared it straight with you. You were like, yep, I'm all over it. So talk to us. What actually happened last week?
Well, this is a huge landmark case. So the city of San Francisco is taking big food companies to court saying they are knowingly creating and producing products that are detrimental to health. And this is placing a huge burden on taxpayers. If this goes ahead and if they are successful, this is about to revolutionize the way we view food and what is permitted on our supermarket shelves. I am hoping that this is the first in many cases where these big food companies are held accountable. And Danni, as you know, I say this is the tobacco moment for food.
Oh my God, it so is. I mean, this is huge. Why has it taken this long? And why San Francisco? What happened, do you know?
Well, I think the attorneys in San Francisco, they have filed a few lawsuits and have been successful in taking big corporations to court over things like this. So they are leading the way. I think that with all the emerging evidence, we can no longer look away. If you've been in the natural health world for decades, which I have, presumably you have too, for a long time, we've been kind of hitting our heads against the walls because every time we've been pointing out these issues, we have had health experts and big corporations saying, where is the evidence? I myself have received plenty of legal letters saying, prove that this is detrimental for health. And then there I am, sending the research links, and I never hear boo back because the evidence is the evidence. But for a long time, we've been said, well, there's evidence showing that it's detrimental, but then there's also this study that shows it's not detrimental. But now we're at a point where the majority, well, over 50% of our diets are coming from ultra-processed foods. There was a study showing that 81% of foods targeted towards children are ultra-processed. There is a huge change in the way we eat. In the past, ultra-processed foods were our sometimes foods. And I'm all, the 70-30 rule, the 80-20, sometimes food or sometimes foods, right? And they should be enjoyed and they're there for a reason to be enjoyed sometimes. But now what we're seeing is that our everyday staples are packed with additives, really nutritionally poor ingredients, and it's really having an impact on our overall health. So the evidence is clear. We know that ultra-processed foods are linked to 32 adverse health outcomes, everything from anxiety, depression, increased ADHD-like symptoms, cardiovascular risk, premature death, cancer, you name it, it's there. So San Francisco and saying, why are taxpayers being burdened with the impact of these big food companies while we are getting sicker? While it's putting this burden on our citizens, why are these big food companies profiting from our ill health? It hasn't been about, let's bring out nutritious foods that are going to be affordable and serve a real purpose in people's lives. It's really about, how are we going to make this muesli bar, pack it full of really nutritionally poor ingredients, put in the additives, but then we are going to market it as being brilliant for health, so that everyone becomes addictive to the artificial flavors, those emulsifiers that give it that nice moorish kind of feel in your mouth, hyper palatable, so you don't actually have to chew. You're not going to get satiated. You're going to eat more of it. But you know what? At the end of the day, that means we're going to make more money. Awesome.
Totally.
And literally, that's what's been behind these big food manufacturers and their thought process in bringing out these foods. Not every product, but as we are seeing, the majority.
And you know what you said before, like, and that's the same, the 80-20 rule, that 20% is sometimes food. And, sometimes food for most people, this is the problem, right? For most people, sometimes food is chocolate, sweets, ice cream, right? But the problem with these companies is they produce food, like you said, that's marketed as healthy, that's marketed to children, that's marketed to vulnerable adults who aren't educated in this space, who believe the claims, who believe the front of the packet that says full of fiber, full of iron, all these things. But what those parents don't realize is that actually is a sometimes food. The things that are in that product need to be part of your 20%. And so what tends to happen is you have parents that think they're doing the right thing by giving them kids cereal for breakfast, muesli bars for morning tea, like flavor enhanced, preservative enhanced yogurts for, and then, all these things. And it's, like you said, it's not 80-20, it's 50-50 now. So I think they need to be held responsible for that because, like you said, they're actually contributing to poor health. And from someone that has gone through bowel cancer this year, from no fault of my own in recent years, something needs to be done, right?
Yeah. And the problem is, and I think it's really important that our listeners and that people understand, this is intentional. They produce these foods with the right amount of oils, the right amount of ultra-processed sweeteners, the right amount of artificial flavors to actually hijack our children's taste buds and adults' taste buds. But my work and my life has been dedicated to children's nutrition because that is when we are shaping these long-lasting eating behaviors. And if a parent is thinking that an up and go is a healthy, nutritious way to start the day, followed by a Milo bar and having some Nutri-Grain and a Simpsons wrap later on in the day and, a sweetened yogurt, which is all marketed as being beneficial, that child's taste buds literally have been skewed, have been hijacked. And then when you try to reintroduce the foods that are more natural, don't have those artificial flavors, they also don't have that soft melt in your mouth texture. It's very hard for kids to accept them. So we are basically creating the pathway for obesity, for overweight, for type 2 diabetes, for bowel cancer. And then when we reach adulthood, what happens is we try to look for ways to remediate the poisons we've been ingesting. So where we should rather look at this preventative approach where we look at how do we start our children with food that is actually beneficial for them. And you're a time poor mum. I'm a time poor mum. We both work. So it's not like we are saying, I can't cook everything from scratch. And, sometimes I say this is actually a very selfish reason that I'm such a big advocate of this because I'm a single time poor mum. I need easy and convenient options on the supermarket shelves that are also affordable. And the only way that's going to happen is if we call out these big food corporations, start voting with our wallets. And I want to start, as you know, with the real food rating and the whole real food movement. I want to start rewarding those brands that are formulating with integrity, those people that are bringing out products that are really solving a problem and creating a more aware and healthy future generation.
Yeah, you're so right. I do cook everything from scratch and my kids do eat a lot of veggies and fruit and boiled eggs because I do struggle to find snacks on the shelf that have no ultra-processed ingredients in them that are actually going to fill my kids up because that's the other thing. Not only, am I busy and time poor, but I have 4 children. That's bloody expensive, I don't have time to spend, or money to spend all this money on it. So it is actually cheaper for me to make things. But, and as much as I love doing that, actually does take time away from me being with the kids, being in the kitchen so often, right? So if I actually could have a really good option, but I don't trust a lot of the companies now because, a lot of the ingredients also don't have to be listed if they're under a certain percentage, we know, which is also concerning.
Yeah. So look, I will share with you. Okay. So
Here we go.
basically, for the last year, and when I say this, I don't say this lightly, I literally have not had a life. I see people going out. I see people going out for dinner. I see people going to the beach. I see people catching up with their friends. And literally, I'm staring at a computer. And anybody that knows me will back this up because they know that is all I do. What I have been doing is I've been analyzing every single additive and every single ingredient that is used in our food products. So I'm talking about lists. So like at the moment, I'm currently getting through 16,000 ingredients, and each ingredient has a whole data set on properties that I have to assess, categorizing if it's a whole food, minimally processed, is it a ultra processed ingredient, what level, is it a quality fat, is it a seed oil, etc., etc. I won't go into it because this is all like when people are talking about things, all I'm seeing is numbers and data flashing across my face. So I'm not the most interesting person at the moment, but what it has shown me is the kind of ingredients that are being used to produce our food. And these, as you said, these are the ingredients that you can tell by reading the nutritional panel or the ingredient list. But the issue that we have, just one of the many issues, is that we have the 5% loophole, right? So if something is part of a compound ingredient, so let's say we have, I'm trying to think of an example, tomato sauce, and in the tomato sauce, we have a mix of herbs and seasonings, which account for less than, a compound ingredient. So it's got about 4 different herbs and spices that make up that herb mix within that tomato sauce. If one of those ingredients contributes to less than 5% of that compound ingredient, it does not have to be declared. However, if it's an additive like sulfites, have to always be declared, or any known allergen. But there's plenty of ingredients that slip by. So we can't be perfect at this stage. We can, as you know, we're advocating for so many changes when it comes to the policies and regulations. So we've got that on the list, but there's plenty that we can tell from the ingredient list. And, I am working around the clock to bring out the Real Food Rating app because you are passionate about food and you are making most things from scratch. So you're amazing. I'm passionate about food and I research it day in and day out. But many people actually have lives, and to all of you people, I'm a little bit envious. I wish I had a life, but I want to make it easy. And I don't believe right now it is easy for the average Australian to really understand what's in their food. You have to be a detective.
Yeah.
You have to kind of turn every product over, and it's great to read the ingredient list, but even myself. So when I'm going through these,
you guys already know I care about what I put in my body, and I'm just as picky about what my kids eat. That's why I love Haven toddler milk. Unlike most toddler milks that use skim milk with added oils, Haven starts with whole milk because whole milk naturally provides the healthy fats that toddlers need. There's no palm oil, no added sugars, just clean, science-backed nutrition with 16 essential vitamins, minerals, and gut-friendly pre- and probiotics. And there's a Haven for every little tummy, A2 cow, goat, and oat for a premium plant-based option. If you want to give it a try, just head to havenbaby.com.au and use Danni50 for 50% off your first single tin purchase.
14,000 ingredients, I have to stop and then go and research because often they're not, obviously whole foods like apples, pears, bananas, we understand. But a lot of these ingredients, the average consumer has no idea what they are.
No. I mean, this is why I suppose it's, for us and educating and get what we do in social media space and, all that space is make it really simple for people. And I do my Turn the Label Over series for that reason. And I think the main thing needs to be like, if you don't know what that ingredient is, if your great grandmother could not make this in her kitchen, then you need to put it back on the shelf, because even just going, oh, it's got some flavor in it. Well, what flavor? Like, need to question it, question everything. And I think we've been so, I don't want to say this, but like molded to just believe what we see. And we see those marketing claims. We see that it says it's good for us. It looks pretty. The kids are drawn to the pictures of it. I did a Turn the Label Over for roll-ups the other day because I saw on someone's story do a lunchbox and still had roll-ups and Oreos and a packet of chips in the lunchbox, all in one lunchbox. I had a bit of a conniption. And even Harper was looking at the ingredients. She's like, I don't even know what some of those are. And she's like, Mummy, what's flavor? Like, what flavor? And I said, exactly what flavor? It's not strawberry. Like, it's, so what is that?
Well, flavors don't have to be declared, and neither do natural flavors. And natural flavors don't mean that it's natural. It's still, they have carriers like maltodextrin, and there are obviously chemical processes. So it's very hard to know. But the thing is, and that's why these series and these, supermarket swaps, and it's so important because you can find those better alternatives, which I know everybody is sharing, and our Instagram feeds are now flooded with people trying to show the better options, which is amazing because it's we're creating more and more awareness, and just giving people those healthier swaps, those healthier alternatives is so important. But it's so hard for the everyday parent, for the everyday consumer, and that's why I'm advocating so hard to actually change it at the regulations, our laws around nutrition policies and regulations in Australia need to be changed. And the problem is that it is so fundamentally flawed from the top down and the bottom up. And that's why we need change, because I really appreciate that not everybody has the interest, the time, or the energy to give it the attention it deserves. And I will say this, when your child goes to a birthday party, let them eat, let them enjoy, let them have the cake, the lollies, etc. It's just where I really focus on is those everyday foods, what's going into the lunchbox every day, what's being served for breakfast every day. Very often I used to do consultations for parents, and they would come in and, oh, golly, we would talk about the grandparents. Now, I have beautiful, beautiful parents, and my children have 2 sets of grandparents. And, my dad, even though I do what I do, he had a grandson, and he remembers his grandfather used to buy him lollies and spoil him with food. He loved to do that for my mum was amazing. So my dad did it behind both mine and my mum's back. Okay. And my the other grandparents, but those were very sometimes. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that people come to me and we would start talking about the grandparents and very upset with the grandparents. And I'm not minimizing that, because I know what it can feel like when you feel you're being undermined. So there's a whole psychology around, especially with in-laws, but we got to love everyone. So what I would say to parents is, how often do they see the grandparents? Once a week? Okay, well, let's not start with what's happening at the grandparents. Let's look at what are they having every day for breakfast. And what I'm trying to say by that is that we got to start with the foods that are being eaten in most of those normalized meals, for breakfast, for lunch, for dinner, or, those sometimes foods. We don't always have to start there with those sometimes foods.
Yeah.
Because we know there are occasions. We know when I go to grandmom's house, I still remember the coconut ice. I don't know what they were called. Coconut. It was like, I don't know. I just remember it was pink and white and had probably loads of colorings in. Yeah, coconut ice. And the gingerbread cookies. That I always just remember that as part of my grandmom, but I only had that once a week. It wasn't the problem. The real problem was growing up in South Africa. So a lot of people don't know that my interest in nutrition is actually, I had my brother suffered from childhood obesity. So we could do a whole session around that and what came with that. Later as adults, we laugh because my other brother was a sports an incredible tennis player. So we always had something called Game in a 2-liter jug in the fridge. Game was like an energy hydrating drink that my tennis player brother used to have to keep him fueled, because he was on the court like 6 hours a day. But my other brother used to drink it, so we were like focusing, I wonder what could be contributing to his weight gain. Oh, well, there you go. Paul's having another liter of Game every day, so we got to look at those like everyday things, not the sometimes foods.
Not the sometimes food. I totally agree. People do ask me, oh, Danni, what do you do when your kids go to birthday parties? And I go, look, I don't really stop them. We have a conversation in the car, because I just don't want them coming home, obviously crazy. But, we have the conversation and they have a bit of cake or they have a bit of something and then that's it, to be honest. I think when you have
Yeah.
the conversations and you're open as well, they're less likely to go wild, right? Because
Yeah,
rather than being
exactly.
like a harsh no. And yeah, every day we're eating whole food, so it's fine. It's funny how you said, like, we were talking about that lawsuit and the city was claiming that the companies are using tactics like the tobacco industry used to make, right? And
Exactly.
when I hear that, I just I don't know if you've seen Mad Men. Did you watch Mad Men, that TV show?
Yes,
And it
yes,
was all that
yes.
advertising around the tobacco and all the tobacco advertising as well. And it's so funny because we really have to get these companies to take some responsibility and we have to take some pressure off the parents, right? Because I feel like they are just doing the best they know with the information they have and they're trusting these companies, just like we did the tobacco companies in the 70s. They
Exactly.
thought that smoking was good for them. Well, you don't smoke now because you know it's bad for you and you know it's not good for your health. But people are still thinking that these muesli bars are good. Like I was literally in the supermarket yesterday and there were these girls choosing a muesli bar packet. They would have been in their 20s, deciding which one. I literally want to turn around and be like, do not have any of those. you know,
Yeah.
they're looking at the labels like high protein, like lots of fiber. And I'm like, no, turn it over. I
Yeah.
really wanted to do it.
Yeah.
And it's just, we just don't know. And I think hopefully if this lawsuit keeps going and then Australia can jump on board, it's actually going to
Well,
help parents, right?
it is, but I think, and I guess the one thing we haven't touched on and what I've really been speaking out in the media and trying to raise awareness about, not only in Australia are we not mounting a lawsuit against these big food companies, our government is actually rewarding them with high health star ratings.
Yeah.
No, and when you liken it to the tobacco companies, a lot of people don't know that these big food companies, the same ones that are being sued in the city of San Francisco lawsuit, are being rewarded, as I said, with the 3-4 health star ratings, but they also helped to design the algorithm which informs how those stars are calculated. So imagine that tobacco companies were in charge of assessing the healthfulness of cigarettes and they were in charge of putting those warning labels on. Potentially we could have cigarettes aren't that great for you, but if you smoke maybe one every packet every other day, it's going to be okay. It's like public health officials need to be the ones setting the standards. We cannot have big food companies and now they're setting up other national food councils where the CEOs and the executives of these big food companies are actually sitting on the boards of these councils. So where is the power to the people, right? And
totally.
There has been huge research coming out. The Lancet series has looked at all different papers around the impacts of ultra-processed foods. And one of the papers, or what the Lancet series actually said, is that we cannot leave it up to our governments. We need a grassroots movement. You need individuals on the ground actually making change, speaking out, and creating the solutions. And when I read that, it was so incredible because that for the last year and a half, I've been working on the Real Food Rating app. I try to get awareness through pointing out the flaws in the health star rating system. I try to approach different Australian organizations. I try to reach out to representatives. I've tried to reach out to a health minister, Mark Butler, but there were other organizations that literally wouldn't give me the time of day. And I thought, well, if you aren't going to create the solution, it was so obvious in my brain the kind of algorithm calculations we needed to assess whether foods are everyday foods, if they're sometimes foods, if they should be limited, or if they should just, because there are foods that just need to be avoided. They wouldn't put any of their resources funding. They actually almost in a way, it was very, what's the word, like, the health star rating system. We've put all this time and effort into it. And I think they're trying to protect their kind of sunken costs. They don't want to just toss it away. And then if they toss it away, they're worried that nothing else will come into play. But here's the thing. If I told you, and you might have heard me reference this on, I think, with Carl, but if I said to you, this whole brand of smoke alarms, they're actually not working very well. They may go off if there's a fire. But you know what? Sometimes they may not go off. But I'm mandating that every single home in Australia uses a smoke alarm to detect a fire. How safe would you feel?
Yeah, exactly. Not safe at all.
Would you would want one that worked. Or if you had a
Yeah.
blood pressure machine, a diagnostic tool that sometimes worked, but sometimes got it wrong, would you want to use that? And so when I spoke to an official, a representative who works with the health star rating system, etc., I said to her quite directly, I said, okay, so you tell me, we know how slowly things move at a snail's pace.
Mm.
The Australian dietary guidelines have not been updated since 2013. 2019, you did an internal review of the health star rating system where the internal review pointed out flaws. Some recommendations, very minuscule ones, were made, but it was noted that industry had too much influence on the algorithm. It was noted that the uptake was very, very low. All of these things were noted, yet nothing has changed. So I said to her, what do I tell parents today with young babies who are making choices based on the health star ratings, and they are going to buy these ultra-processed muesli bars? What do we tell them? Because things will only change in about 3-4 years. And she said to me, basically, ignore the health star ratings, flip the product over. So it was like an admission of, well, they should be reading the back of the food. But then why do we have a government-endorsed food rating system if we can't trust it?
No.
Why are we even considering mandating it?
Yeah. And even, even you and me who have qualifications in this space, people always, not everyone, but people will trust the government, right? They'll go, oh, but then why? And then you go, well, you have to actually take things into your own hands. And this is what I was saying, we are just so wired to believe what we see, and the government is supposed to be always right because we're supposed to be able to trust them, right? Let's be honest. But
exactly.
Right now we have this huge epidemic really of bowel cancer in young people. It's actually ridiculous. It's 290% up.
It's
what
crazy.
are we going to tell our kids in 25 years that are eating all this ultra processed food because they're relying on the health star rating?
And, and the real problem is that when we look at bowel cancer and we look at all the synthetic additives, we look at the emulsifiers, one of the ways to game the health star rating system is to actually increase your fiber score, right? So if you look at a lot of products, and a lot of the ways that these companies are doing it is they are adding in those synthetic fibers. So carboxymethylcellulose, in studies, these are linked to gut inflammation, all the precursors for cancer. The Nutrisanti study shows the impact, different cancers. We have to ask ourselves, why are those figures up? Why? We cannot negate the fact that a lot of what we're eating is these additives are linked to cancer, cardiovascular risk, gut inflammation, etc., etc. And then people will say, but it's been studied. And the study shows that it's generally regarded as safe in the acceptable daily intake levels, or EFSA, their ADI levels. The thing is, there are no long-term studies where we are looking at these additives in a cumulative and synergistic effect. What that means is we are not tallying up all the different products
100%.
over the course of every day that we are eating, and then how they synergistically work together. So if we look at artificial food dyes, right, if you combine them with sodium benzoates, the impact on behavior is worsened. That's just one synergistic effect. But have we looked at how 471, that's emulsifier, how that relates if you've got synthetic food dyes, emulsifiers, and synthetic fibers and sulfites in one product? No, this has not. And there are products that I see products with 8 additives. Well, actually,
I know.
Even more.
I spoke about this a few weeks ago because someone said to me, but Danni, if it's generally regarded as safe, it should be safe for us. I was like, yeah, but if you're having that one product in the serving size once a day, let's just take that sort of example before. You've got your cereal, so you're having a generally regarded as safe preservative, also, what is it, in that one product in the serving size. Are kids eating serving sizes? I would say probably not, especially if the parents are pouring it, or even if the kids are pouring it. Then you're going to have it again in that muesli bar. Well, now it's actually not regarded as safe because you've had double the amount. And then, like you said, I did a turn the packet over, which is going up tonight, on Christmas stuff. Now, again, it's once a year, I get it. But the Christmas mince pies that I turned over had 20 different numbers in it. 20.
Yeah. No, I mean,
And, that's supposed to be a sometimes food, which is fine. But if you're then pairing that with your cereals, your everything else, we're literally filling our kids with, ugh.
yeah, and it just that is, as you said, in a sometimes food, and it sometimes still shouldn't have all of those. I mean, there should
No.
be sugar, there should be butter, there should be cream, there should be flour. We don't need all of those additives. I'm seeing
No.
those same things on the Real Food Rating website. I did it as an in-depth expose of muesli bars and wraps. I mean, wraps,
Oh,
wholemeal wraps, getting a 5 health star rating. And I've showed how many preservatives and additives. So, the more we do this, the more we deep dive, the more we look at all of these products, we can see there's a real problem. The question now, and the question that I pose to every single person on social media that has got a voice and that is, advocating for change, we have to come together if we are really going to make a change. Everybody's working in these pockets, and it's amazing, the awareness. When I started doing supermarket swaps. I think my first one was in about 2018 or 2016. And there was me doing it, maybe one or two other people. Can't even remember if there was anyone else doing it. It was novel. It was like, now so many people are doing it. And each person has got a different demographic and a different target audience that they are reaching out to. So together we are creating this absolute ocean of people that are being educated and informed. But what we need is a movement. We need voices that we can then advocate to governments and say, you know what? We are not accepting this anymore. Big food companies, if you're going to put those types of foods on the supermarket shelves, call a spade a spade. Don't market it as a healthy way to energize your kids' day. Actually say, this is full of sugar, full of additives. It tastes delicious, but eat at your own risk. Call or say, or it should be in the confectionery aisle.
100%.
Or maybe take all of your resources and start producing and manufacturing foods that serve a purpose.
Wouldn't that be nice? I mean, that would be amazing. Look, and I want to acknowledge it is possible for your kids to love whole foods, but like you said, these foods are designed to literally hijack yours and your kids' taste buds. And, you look after kids, I look after adults. And I have to, undo all of that from adults who really struggle with eating whole foods because it doesn't taste as nice because they've been used to these highly palatable foods. So it is possible, but as you would probably be able to explain better, kids are really malleable and they're really adaptable and they can change their palate easily. It just takes consistency and a bit of hard work, right?
It does. And I started out with adults, and I take my hat off to you. I found it so hard because you are retraining people's brains, their whole relationship with food. And you've got to unpack so many different layers, emotional, behavioral, physical. There's so much that goes into it. So it's amazing work, and it's so sorely needed. My focus is on children. Exactly why? Because they are malleable. Because if we start introducing the right foods from the beginning, we don't actually see those same problems later on. Now, I've been through all the stages with clients. I've seen them grow up with their children as well as my own children. The reality is when they are little, you've got that window of opportunity, those first 7 years, the first 1,000 days of life. When you have a baby and a toddler, they are going to eat what you give them, unless there's other options and I will say there are underlying issues. So I'm not minimizing anyone's experience. If you having a fussy eater is very, very difficult for parents. And one of the things that I know is also difficult is when the people say, if your child's hungry, they will eat. Now, there are some children that will not eat when they're hungry. There are some children that can't even identify that they are hungry. They don't have those internal cues. We call them problem feeders. And this general information and what we're talking about is not for children with underlying issues. Those families need additional support, and it's very, very tricky. But we're now talking for the general children.
Yes, agree.
They will generally eat family foods and what they are being exposed to. But from the age of 6 months or 8 months, if you start giving them a rice cereal that's already got maltodextrin, already got flavorings, and then you give them a teething, rusk or muesli bar that's already got sugar and glucose and artificial flavors, they will start to reject homemade foods because their taste buds are more sensitive than ours, and they easily get hooked onto those foods.
Yeah.
When we take those foods away, we can retrain them. Absolutely. Most children will go through fussy eating phases. And what I say to parents, the strategies we implement during these fussy eating phases, they will dictate how quickly they come through them. And if they do come through them, because it's very normal for them to go through those fussy eating phases.
Yeah.
But when we start to give them, cookies and other foods because we know they'll eat them, that's when we ingrain these habits. And I forgot to tell you, just by the way, if anybody's actually struggling with fussy eating, I've just written a book about fussy eating. So, and it's coming out March the 3rd. So if anyone's listening, completely forgot to mention that. It's called The Unfussy Eaters Club. It's being published by Murdoch Books, and it's all about starting solids, but it's not just about starting solids. There's 100 sugar-free recipes. So no, even like maple syrup, honey, it's completely free from added sugars. But then there are tips and tricks. Like in the bottom, I've got to make it sweeter, and I'll show you how to change that for older kids. But it's got strategies for every age and stage of how to overcome fussy eating. So just by the by. So
we'll have to put it in the show notes.
Yeah, and you can pre-order it. So that's where all of my advice. But the one thing you've absolutely nailed is that if you implement the strategies, repetition, role modeling, they do not only come to eat whole foods, but absolutely love them. And maybe I'll just share, which I don't generally share, my own son. Okay, he was my muse. He's on the cover of my first book, Wholesome Child, and he never had sugar in the first, I think, 2.5 years of his life. Didn't want it. One day we went to a birthday party. He picked up a Tim Tam, and it's like the first time he's ever seen a Tim Tam, and he ate it. I think that was his first taste of sugar. And, from about 2 to 6, we kind of, we didn't have sugar and those kind of foods at all. And then he'd start go to birthday parties, get exposed to it. Anyway, long story. He's now a 15-year-old teenager, and he's a very normal, well-adjusted teenager. When he's out with his mates, and unfortunately, when they're 15, you pay 15, right? He's got his money. He goes out. He eats what his friends eat. But when he comes home, the first thing he wants is a lettuce. And if I don't go, I'm not just talking about a few, he'll take a full lettuce and he will eat it like an apple. I'm like, you've got to wash it. And then on a weekend at 11 p.m. at night, because that's, when they get older, they go to sleep later. He'll go, Mom, can you peel me a cucumber with lemon juice? I'm like, can you not just peel your own cucumbers? Do I still need to peel your cucumbers? And, unfortunately, when we order on Uber Eats, he doesn't want the $16 pizza, which I would never, we always went for quality foods. He wants the $30 pizza. So we don't have Uber Eats that much. But if I do have Uber Eats, we go for quality. Or if he wants to order a burger, he now suddenly wants a Wagyu burger. I'm like, go get a job and afford your own Wagyu burger, because not that I like Wagyu burgers, but, it's just... It's just
great.
He's got a taste for quality. He wants his extra virgin olive oil, and if it's not quality extra virgin olive oil, some people worry about what happens when they grow up. Well, if you implement those healthy eating behaviors from the start, they are going to be typical teenagers. They are going to eat what other kids eat, but when they come back in the home, you have wired their taste buds to enjoy natural whole foods, and that is what they're going to expect. And vegetables with every meal, a salad every day goes to school. Those are send him to school without his salad.
Yeah.
He's not a very happy teenager.
I love that you've done that, because, my eldest is 7, so I haven't gotten to that stage yet. And people have said to me, aren't you worried that she's just going to get into a teenager and she's just going to want all the, the bad food anyway, or the, ultra processed food anyway? And I said, kind of what you said. I said, look, I don't know what's going to happen. The only thing I can do right now is educate her and keep talking about it and feed her this way. I mean, even now at 7, she's so funny. If we've had like I don't know, if she has been at a birthday party or something, sometimes she will come home and she'll be like, I need some thriving food, Mum. Like, I'm feeling, and she wants some veggies and she wants some fruit because she's like feeling yucky, and she understands what makes her feel good inside. So I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think that's going to make a few parents feel a bit better about how they're educating their kids because, as you said, once they're 15, you have to let the reins go a little bit.
Yeah, you do. And I think that's where it can be a bit tricky when you still, and this is all about, food and the relationship to food. It changes as we grow up. So the way that you would, work with a 7-year-old or a 6-year-old, a 5-year-old, it's very different to how you would,
Yeah.
talk about food with a 12-year-old, a 13-year-old, a 14-year-old. But those eating behaviors that we implement from the start, they sit there, they don't go away, right? So teens will be teens, but they will come back to it. And when you feel good in your body and you have something that doesn't feel so good in your body, they recognize that. And then they come home, they're like, oh, I want something. I need a salad. I need veggies. I need lots of water. I need this or that.
Yeah.
Because they can actually feel the difference. Where if you've always eaten those types of foods with a lot of additives, there may be no ability to differentiate in what kind of the difference between eating whole foods and eating ultra-processed foods.
For sure. Well, we know it's not going to necessarily be easy, but people can reach out to you and they can reach out to me if they need more help. So do you want to just tell people where they can find you? I mean, I know you're so busy doing all this research, which is so amazing, but where they can find you and also support you in the real food rating as well.
Yeah, no, I would love. I mean, this is a grassroots movement. There is no big backers here. I'm a single mom kind of trying to make a change in a little corner of the world that I can. But they can go on to realfoodrating.com and sign up to the newsletter. So this is a community of like-minded people. So whatever we're advocating for, if we need signatures on petitions, you'll also get alerts to when the Real Food Rating app is released. Lots of practical tips, recipes, everything every family needs to make a change. My book, anybody who's struggling with a fussy eater, I mean, this is something that I have worked with for the last 2 decades. So if you've got a fussy eater and you need support and guidance, please look at, my book, Unfussy Eaters Club. You can pre-order. The link is on Instagram in my bio, and get in touch. If anybody's really struggling and, needs help, they can get in touch. But if there's anybody out there and they've got any nutrition expertise, any qualifications, and they actually want to lend some hours to do some work to help with research so that we can really change the way things are, get in touch.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you so much for jumping on again. We'll have to jump on as this court case kind of progresses as well and see where that's going. And then also closer to the time when your book comes out as well, maybe.
Absolutely. I would love that. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, my love. Chat soon.